In today's video, we're taking a look at some NHL offseason trade rumors. We're looking at the Montreal Canadiens, the St. Louis Blues, and the New York Islanders. Plus, we have news from the NHL waiver wire, another signing, and we have a pretty substantial article in The Athletic looking at the entire span of the Eugene Melnyk era in Ottawa. Some people find it controversial, the timing not great, but we're going to discuss this article coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of things to talk about today. First up, a couple quick news items. First up, on the waiver wire, the Red Wings had Magnus Hellberg on waivers because he was a European goaltender who they signed yesterday. For him to be able to join the team, he had to clear waivers since he was coming from Europe, and he indeed did clear, so he's fully able to join the Red Wings. I know when he first signed, it wasn't quite clear if he was coming over immediately or the contract was for next season, but regardless, where he was coming from Europe as a free agent, he was going to require waivers. So in that front, he's cleared, can join the team. They can give him a chance to play, see how it works out. And if they want to extend him beyond into next season, that will be entirely up to them. So that's obviously a good move for them to improve their goalie depth. And from there, we also have a signing in Chicago where they've extended young player Reese Johnson to a 2-year contract extension valued at $800,000 per season. Now, as I mentioned, we also have an article today I want to take a look at from The Athletic, and it's, like I said, it's getting a little bit of attention here, especially in the city of Ottawa and a lot of Ottawa media and Ottawa fans. The article is written in combination by Ian Mendes, Katie Strang, who's one of the top investigative sports journalists, really anywheres, and as well as Dan Robson as well. So it was 3 different writers participating in this project, and essentially they wanted to put over this article to kind of go through all of the whole time frame of Melnyk's era as owner in Ottawa, because there was a lot of stories, a lot of rumors. We know, and especially probably in the second half of the time that he owned the team, there was not a great relationship with the fans, and there was a lot of talk about things that happened behind the scenes that just made the organization not sound like a very good place to work, and it just sounded like a very toxic work environment at times. So they went through a lot of the stories. They did outline through a lot of sources, a lot of the things that took place that weren't good, but they also talked about the good side of Melnyk as well. They kind of showed a bit of everything, and essentially they also talked about this on a podcast on The Athletic too, kind of outlining why they felt they had to do this, and essentially they felt it was right to tell the truth. Essentially, that's what journalism is supposed to do. You want to get the stories out there, confirm what things were like, tell the truth, and essentially make people aware of what was going on. It's an opportunity now with Melnyk not in the picture anymore for this team to transition to a better culture and to kind of revive the fan base and to kind of move forward here in a new direction, hopefully, and get this team back on track on the business side with its fans and on the ice as well. So basically, it kind of goes through a lot of the good stuff in the early days when Melnyk first bought the team. The relationship was really good with the fans. He put on a free concert featuring the Eagles for season ticket holders. Like, everything was really, really great in the beginning. And then probably around 2007, 2008, things started to change a little bit. Apparently during the Stanley Cup Finals, when after they had lost to the Ducks in 2007, he went into the dressing room, was given a speech that was really bizarre and yelling at the Ducks to keep quiet, who had obviously won and were celebrating. Like, just really bizarre stuff. Obviously, so things kind of changed a little bit there. He also went through a business change where he ended up with some issues and had to pay like a $24 million fine. Obviously, that impacted things financially. Then he got divorced a few years later. And it sounded like from that point forward that Melnyk really started to change a little bit and was really becoming very difficult to work for. Based on quotes in this article that talks about a lot of people who work there, and some of the people who they even work there now who asked for to participate, even anonymously, and they said they were scared shitless. Exact words that Katie Strang used. People were afraid of what Melnyk might say or do. He was very demanding to the point that employees would receive emails at odd hours, and he would expect them to returned the message, and it was really, really difficult. A lot of high executive people were fired based on like odd conversations and tirades that he would have, and it just kind of shows the toxic work environment that was created. At one point, there was a consultancy brought in to do like an organization or review, and it was only like 6% of the staff and people that worked there said they would recommend it as a place to work. I mean, that should be pretty eye-opening that your work environment is pretty toxic at that point. Also tells a story about a younger Ukrainian male who he became friends with. Of course, we know Melnyk is of Ukrainian descent, and it was a place dear to his heart. He did do a lot of good as well, a lot of charity stuff. He ended up making his contact, his friend. He brought him back. He ended up coming from Ukraine to go work with him between time in Ottawa and in the Barbados. He was spent time down there and down south and was like a property manager for him. And they had a great relationship. He kind of became almost like a father figure to this young man. But then he eventually later turned on him and accused him of stealing a bunch of money. And it was just really odd. But even after all that, and the relationship kind of went through all those, the good stuff and then the bad stuff. Even recently, before Melnyk's death, apparently he had some contact with the man who had returned to Ukraine a few years ago and had helped him financially to flee the Ukraine due to the war. So it goes to show you that Melnyk had a good heart and certainly was very charitable and very helpful in a lot of ways, but it just at the same time was extremely difficult to work with, and certainly it sounded like he was a big-time micromanager. So a lot of the stories told in this article are not really new for the most part. To me, I already knew for following this team and being a fan of this team for a long time that the behind-the-scenes work environment sounded extremely toxic. It sounded like not a fun place to work, and especially the last probably even like 8 to 10 years sounded especially rough. This article just confirms all of that. In fact, makes it sound even worse than I even thought. And I'm pretty knowledgeable of that situation. So it's really not a good look. We already knew the organization certainly had its fair share of blunders in the news when they get all the wrong attention. There was one comment in the article from one of the people they spoke to who said that the Senators didn't have much brand power anymore because it wasn't the Senators as a brand, it was the Melnyk brand who kind of took over, and that was certainly true at times for sure. So we know that, like I said, the relationship was strained with the fans. He was a very polarizing man. I know some certain Ottawa members of the media question the timing of this, saying it's opportunistic and whatnot. But like I said, these guys are journalists. Their job is to tell the truth. That a lot of these stories were not new. For the few people in the Ottawa media who are criticizing the Athletic writers for doing this, to me, you're just as much, you can look at yourself in the mirror here, because you knew about all these stories years ago and have never reported on them. So clearly it's a situation where, maybe you should just stay out of it and let everybody do their own job here. Stories need to be told. Healing needs to begin with the fan base. People need to understand what was going on, and so they can kind of start to support their team again and move forward. But I will link the article. It is a subscription-based, obviously, service, so you do have to have a subscription to read the full article, but I highly recommend you check it out. It really tells quite the tale of the good, the bad, and the ugly of the Melnyk era as owner in Ottawa. Where we go from here, of course, we still don't know. Many suspect it's probably going to be into maybe mid to late next month before we have any clarity from the family on what their intentions are. If they want to own the team, sell a portion of the team. There's so many different directions it can go in. I know there's all kinds of groups that are apparently reportedly showing interest and will be ready to make offers if it comes to that. So time will tell. We will see where this goes. But certainly check out this article. I personally have no problem with it and think that some of the local media that were criticizing it should probably, like I said, I know there's Ottawa media, which I don't completely understand, seem to be divided, and there seem to be especially one or two that kind of stick out as not really being well liked by everybody else. And a lot of that, I think, was because of how they got all the inside scoops from Melnyk, and Melnyk really treated a lot of the other media not very well either over the years. The relationship certainly changed. If you dare said anything remotely negative about the team and its struggles or anything, then he would reprimand you and rip you and try to use scare tactics to ruin your career. I've heard that from numerous people. So now on to some other news here. I want to take a look at some offseason trade rumors. I know Darren Dreger was talking about some stuff in Montreal regarding the goaltending. Now, we talked a few times about Carey Price and how we don't know his future. Is he going to play this year? Is he going to be back next year? We don't know, but he did confirm, which was obviously widely speculated, that there was a lot of interest in goaltender Jake Allen ahead of the NHL trade deadline. Of course, he's a very reliable goaltender. He's played very well in Montreal the last couple of years, and at the same time has a pretty reasonable contract that most teams can work with. So if you want to have a 1A, 1B kind of tandem or even a solid backup, he certainly fits the bill for a lot of teams. Now, of course, Montreal didn't trade him for a variety of reasons. One, because of the Carey Price injury, their goaltending situation was very much up in the air. Secondly, he was hurt for a stretch leading to the deadline and hadn't really played for a while, which probably did, give teams a bit of concern. Of course, like I said, though, where we don't know the future of Price, if Price ends up moving on, I don't think Jake would too as well. To me, they're going to keep one for sure. But if Carey Price, where he has a full no move, big contract, it'd be difficult to trade. If Price returns and is able to play next year, I would not be shocked if teams that were calling Montreal before on Allen return the interest and maybe see if they can pull off a deal here, because teams like, Edmonton, for example, Colorado, maybe Toronto if Campbell doesn't sign. There's different teams out there that certainly have a lot of goaltending question marks. As we talked about in the last couple of days, the goalie carousel could really pick up. There's a lot of UFA goalies that we don't know if they're going to re-sign. Other goalies have been rumored to be traded. So it could set off a whole spin-off effect here of other moves, which could result in Montreal being a part of that. So time will tell. But if Price ends up staying, don't be shocked if Allen is ended up being traded as well. Doesn't mean they're going to, but the interest is there from around the NHL. Now, I also want to talk about the Blues quickly. Andy Strickland had a comment on Twitter in the past day talking about Vladimir Tarasenko and the fact that he says he's made it clear that to his teammates and coaches that St. Louis is where he wants to be. Of course, last offseason, it was well documented publicly that Tarasenko wanted out of St. Louis and had requested a trade. Was unhappy with how the surgeries have gone with his shoulders. Obviously, he's missed a lot of time and kind of blamed team doctors and how things were handled and wanted out of there. Of course, he was not traded because no deal ever materialized. They exposed him in the expansion draft. Seattle never took him. And he's bounced back quite nicely this year. Look on pace to score 30-plus goals. So I think at this point, the interest probably would pick up if they decided to revisit that. But he's been a big part of their offense, playing a lot with Robert Thomas, Jordan Kyrou, and has really fit in nicely. Seems to have no issues with his teammates. So if he wants to be there, I don't think they're going to even think about it anymore, really, because to me, he's playing too well that it doesn't make sense for them. I mean, if for some reason this is not true and he wants out still, I don't think they'd have a hard time like they did last year. He'd be entering the final year of his contract. He's proven he's healthy and can still be productive, and I think the interest would be there. But at this point, if he wants to be in St. Louis, it doesn't make any sense for them to consider a trade. So I guess for Blues fans, if you're a Tarasenko fan especially, that's good news, and sounds like he won't likely be moving after all. Lastly here, I want to take a look at the New York Islanders. I know Kevin Kerr's recently had some comments from Lou Lamoriello looking at what went wrong this year and moving forward. And one of his quotes was that he said, over the next period of time, we will find out about our scores. And this is where we've underproduced this year. So clearly, which is not a big surprise, a lot of guys have not been scoring at the pace that they need to. Case in point, Anthony Beauvillier, Josh Bailey. To a degree, you can lump Matthew Barzal in that category as well, and they're just not getting the job done. You've seen Anders Lee pick it up. You've seen Brock Nelson have a solid year. Pajot's picked it up lately. Paul Mary's picked it up lately. They've been a much better team in the second half of the year. They're not going to make the playoffs, but at least they made that interesting race here to see if there was any chance they could catch like Washington for a wild card spot. It's too far too late now, but they at least were looking like they were a team that were playing for something, and they had some good games in there. So they certainly made you wonder where this team was all season. But certainly, they had a bad schedule. They had COVID early on. They're certainly not getting any younger, and there's a lot of factors I think that went into that. and it's just the way it is. But certainly, many people took these comments from Lou Lamoriello to suggest that either shape up or we're going to ship you out and try to trade you in the offseason. And I think some of the players I mentioned are your prime targets that they very well could. Clearly, they need another top six scorer, and they could certainly use another puck-moving defenseman. And guys like Bailey and Beauvillier would be your prime trade chips to try to accomplish that. I don't think Bailey's going to get you much. Bailey would probably be, if anything, a cap dump if they can move him. But Beauvillier is young enough and hopefully dynamic enough that he can bring back a decent return. Wouldn't be shocking to see Kiefer Bellows back, considering where things are at in the season, and he's not even a regular in the lineup right now. I don't know if he's ever going to be. I think it's time for the Islanders to give him a fresh start, in my opinion. So it wouldn't be shocking if they even packaged up maybe Beauvillier and Bellows to try to get either a top six scorer or a real solid D-man. They need to get ideally both, but it's going to be challenged. I know there's some that think maybe Varlamov doesn't come back next year too. I'm not convinced that they're going to move him. To be honest, it would make sense. I just don't know that they are, because of the relationship with Sorokin. He's a good mentor, and you're going to have two goalies. It's not the easiest thing to do to do it, but from a cap perspective, it makes sense at least. But either way, with Matthew Barzal too, at the end of his RFA contract that he's signed, he's going to be due a $10 million qualifying offer, and that is nowhere near where he's playing right now. So are they going to end up in a situation where they can do reverse arbitration like we talked about before? Maybe Brock Besser and the Canucks going through that. He had an 85-point rookie campaign and has been a 60-point player ever since for 4 years now. That 85-point campaign was John Tavares' last season on Long Island, so he was not in the top pivot role. He was more of a secondary center, and he probably had more favorable matchups, and that probably played a role in the fact that he was able to put up more points. But now that the pressure's on him to be the top center, and you could also factor in that he hasn't had the greatest wingers at times. They need to figure out a way to get Barzal going, and they need to figure out the next contract, because it's going to prove to be a very huge problem. There's just no way they can justify giving him $10 million. Now, he has another year before they have to talk about that to kind of get things together, but still, that's a big stretch from where he's at versus where he needs to be to justify that kind of money. But they need a dynamic winger for Barzal. To me, he hasn't looked as much engaged. He certainly hasn't produced the way you think he's capable of. Considering the skill level he has with the puck and his skating, he should be playing at a higher level. I don't think he's a player they would consider trading, but I think they need to figure out a way to get him going, whether it's a change in coach or whether it's a change in line mates. Something has to give here, because he's a big part of this offense, and he's just not where he needs to be. He should be an 80, 90-point player with his skills, and he's not near that. So I think that's something else I need to figure out this offseason as well. So let me know your thoughts on everything discussed here today down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.